Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome in across the continent and beyond for another very exciting Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants broadcast. It's pretty early in the school year, and so many of you are new to us, and if you're joining for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And you're catching us in a very exciting day because we are smack dab in the middle of our epic Ambassadors of Conservation series in conjunction with the amazing ladies of If Then She Can. For those who haven't joined us for one of these series before, If Then celebrates and showcases the most amazing women scientists and explorers on planet Earth. It's the greatest campaign I've ever seen for that. I really encourage you, check out their website. There's so much to explore and discover. Like all of our programs too, this one's going to YouTube. So if you want to check it out in 3 weeks or 3 years or like 4,000 other programs, you can head there and do just that. There's so much to explore and discover right there. Now, I'm particularly excited today because we are on the final of a triple header. We were with Sam Wins to start the day live in San Diego at Cabrillo National Monument talking about national parks. We just wrapped up with Jesse Rack talking about mighty morphin amphibians. But this program was the one that when I shared it with my family and friends got people the most excited because we are going to learn a little bit about rigs as reefs. It sounds a bit outlandish, this idea of these monuments to capitalism, to changing the world, and sometimes maybe a negative way being used as the hubs for lots of wildlife. But Emily Hazelwood and Amber Sparks are here to talk to us today about their amazing work with the Blue Latitudes Foundation in doing just that. So without further ado, I'm going to zip it because you're not here to talk to me. Amber and Emily, welcome to the broadcast. So nice to have you on for the, I think, third or fourth time, my first time hosting you, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, we're happy to be here.
I know you have a lot to share with us, so I'm going to zip it. This presentation looks beautiful. I've scarcely seen a better underwater picture, so I'll leave it to you two to take us away and blow our minds. Let's do this thing.
Great. Well, thanks for having us. We're thrilled to be here this afternoon so that we can be telling you a story about our work. And this is the story that's going to take you underwater to explore the ecosystems found below offshore oil and gas platforms.
In California, there are 27 offshore oil and gas platforms. These platforms are made of steel, and they look like big industrial giants out there. And all these platforms have booming ecosystems that exist below the surface. Hopefully this keeps going.
The imagery is so beautiful. It just, you can't even take it. The computer is not freeze.
That's often how it goes. Well, this little introduction was really to introduce and present these offshore oil and gas platforms. In California, we have 27 offshore platforms that from the surface look just like this, menacing industrial giants. Many of these structures have been placed offshore for decades, extracting oil and gas resources from the seafloor. These platforms are massive. Think the size of the Empire State Building with beams and cross beams that go all the way down to the seafloor, from the surface down to the seafloor. But at a certain point, the oil wells dry up, and the oil companies are faced with this question. What do we do with these structures when the oil dries up? Enter the engineering feat of a lifetime. How to remove these platforms, like I mentioned, the size of the Empire State Building, from the ocean, from the seafloor. This is a very technical and challenging process called decommissioning, and it typically involves sealing and capping the wells and then removing all the drilling infrastructure. The last step is to remove this platform jacket that had been supporting all the drilling infrastructure over time. And the challenge arises because these platform jackets have actually, over the past decades that they had been in the water column, have been colonized by marine life and have developed into thriving marine ecosystems. In California, every beam and crossbeam is covered in life. We see scallops, anemones, mussels, schools of fish. We even see some of our state saltwater fish, the Garibaldi, that nest and make their permanent home on these structures. So rigs to reef that we'll be talking to you about today is an alternative to completely removing the structure from the seafloor. Through this process, an oil company can modify the platform so that it can continue to support marine life as an artificial reef.
But what exactly is an artificial reef? We see examples of artificial reefs throughout the world's oceans, and people have been using artificial reefs for hundreds, up to thousands of years, starting in ancient China, where fishermen would place structures on the seafloor in order to encourage fish to enter their nets. But what makes an oil platform such a unique candidate for an artificial reef? Well, the answer lies in the structure itself. Stretching from sea floor to sea surface, these platforms can be as tall as the Empire State Building. That creates a lot of real estate for marine life to grow and thrive on. Additionally, these platforms are very complex with lots of beams and cross beams, creating lots of nooks and crannies for marine life to utilize as their platform homes. And finally, these platforms are often located in blue ocean settings. That means they're away from nearshore erosion, pollution, and runoff. And that makes excellent habitat for marine life. In fact, in California, we find that many of the offshore oil and gas platforms function in an entire circle of life, where we have these scallops and mussels at the very top of the platform. And when these scallops and mussels die, they fall all the way down to the seafloor, sometimes down to depths of 1,200 feet, and they create big shell mounds. And that's exactly what it sounds like, a big mound of shells. And within these shells, a lot of different species of fish, such as rockfish, will lay their eggs. So the dead shells then become a nursery ground for rockfish. And when these rockfish grow older, they will move all the way back up to the very top of the platform structure and begin the circle of life all over again.
There are several ecological benefits that come from leaving these structures in place, especially in California, where the platforms have been found to provide much, if not all, of the ecosystem and habitats for some heavily fished species like rockfish. Well, we really have to ask ourselves this question of, are these structures functioning as true artificial reefs, or are they just temporarily providing a temporary habitat for fish? And to answer these questions, we can ask more questions, which is, are these platforms necessary for spawning, breeding, feeding, growing to maturity, and are they contributing to a healthy and sustainable ecosystem? These questions will really help us understand this concept of production versus attraction. Are the structures necessary habitat or just temporary structures? Temporary habitat. And now we'll jump into a look globally, because there are oil platforms in every ocean. In this map of the globe, you see red and blue, and these red and blue colors represent offshore, or represent oil and gas resources. And as you can see, the resources are highly concentrated along the shoreline and offshore. In fact, in every ocean across the world, we have offshore oil and gas platforms that are extracting resources. So with all these structures offshore, you would think that there would be rigs to reef programs or decommissioning alternatives that were widely and globally accepted. But that's not the case. There are only a few places that have rigs to reef programs. First, we'll take a look at California, where back in 2010, former Governor Schwarzenegger signed in Assembly Bill 2503, which allows for platforms to be repurposed as reefs. However, in that legislation, they did not assign liability for the platform jacket post-reefing. So who would manage this structure as an artificial reef moving forward? And because of that discrepancy, none of California's 27 platforms have been reefed. This stands in stark contrast to the Gulf of Mexico, where over 500 platforms have been repurposed as reefs in the states of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. And what they do is that when a platform is reefed, the oil wells are sealed and capped, and then the platform jacket is donated to the state. And the state manages it as they would any other artificial reef. Another spot that is reefing is off of Malaysia, where platforms have been completely repurposed for ecotourism, including the topside. This is a picture of the Sea Ventures dive rig. It's an eco resort where you can go and stay on the platform and then dive the platform reef and the surrounding reefs. This is a really interesting and alternative look at how to reuse these structures. Other areas throughout Southeast Asia are beginning to develop their rigs to reef program, such as in the Gulf of Thailand, where they recently passed new rigs to reef legislation and have begun their first reefing programs here. The reefing programs developed in the Gulf of Thailand required stakeholder engagement and buy-in. That means working with local universities and fishermen to ensure that any reefs are benefiting the local people. Lastly, we'll take a look at platforms off the coast of Gabon in West Africa, where Dr. Enrique Sala, a National Geographic explorer, went and dove on these platforms. And what he found is that while trawl fishing had decimated fisheries populations around the structures themselves were hotspots for life. His work got those platforms off Gabon incorporated into one of Africa's largest marine parks.
Now, there are several key elements that make for a successful Rigs to Reefs program. The first is platform placement. Platforms that are placed at the mouth of a river are going to experience lots of things like excess pollution, runoff, excess sedimentation, and you're not going to find very healthy reefs. So we want to make sure we're choosing platform candidates that are located in blue ocean settings, very oftentimes miles away from the coastline. We also want to think about years in the water column. A platform that's quite old, maybe it's been in the water for 50 years, is going to have a much more rich and robust marine ecosystem attached to the structure, as opposed to a brand new structure that was just recently placed there. Structural complexity is another component. Some platforms might be monopiles, meaning they're just single columns in the water, and there's not going to be a lot of nooks and crannies for marine life to grow and thrive on. So we tend to see much healthier reefs and much more substantial reefs on very complex structures that have lots of beams and cross beams, as opposed to single monopiles. And then we also lastly want to think about reefing methodology. Some platforms can be reefed onto their side and toppled onto the side, but what if a platform is located in 2,000 feet of water? If it's placed onto its side, it's going to have a very different ecosystem, and it could have negative impacts on the deep sea environment, which is very sensitive. So typically, we'd want to bring those platform structures to more shallow water environments to be placed onto the side and reefed.
We're going to take a look at a case study of a platform decommissioning in California. As I mentioned, reefing in California has yet to happen, although we have the political pathway through Assembly Bill 2503. The major hurdle is this issue of liability for the platform jacket and who is going to take responsibility for it as an artificial reef once it has been reefed. One of the benefits of taking on that liability is that that organization or Department of Fish and Wildlife would get massive would get a portion of the cost savings. Currently 85% of the saved costs would go to California, and it funds the endowment for marine preservation and conservation. In California, if 23 of our 27 platforms were to be reefed, there would be over $1 billion in saved costs. 80% of that would go back to the state into an endowment for marine preservation and conservation. So 800 million would go back to the state to fund Department of Fish and Wildlife and other state-run research initiatives. This is a major contributing factor to ensuring that the state will take on that liability for the platform structure. And although we have our 27 offshore oil and gas platforms, none of them have been reefed. But this takes a look at where we currently stand in California. The red and black triangles represent oil and gas platforms, the 27 oil and gas platforms. Black are the active structures and red are the inactive structures. Inactive means that the structures are no longer producing oil and gas. Rather, the operators are beginning the process of decommissioning. As you can see, there are a significant amount of structures in California that are inactive. And that means that they are moving forward with the process of decommissioning. And they don't get to just lollygag forever. There is a federal regulation that mandates that once they've become inactive, they have 2 years to decommission and come up with their decommissioning plan. So there's a tight timeline to see these structures either fully removed or reefed. This gives us another graphic indicating that 17 of our structures are currently inactive. One of the major sticking points in California is that these structures have been highly researched. And what they found is that our structures are some of the most productive habitats globally, more productive than estuaries or coral reefs. And that really has to do with the structure itself, like Emily talked about, stretching from sea floor to sea surface. There's a lot of real estate. BSEE, or the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, that's a federal regulator that oversees work and our public lands offshore, continues to support the reuse of decommissioned platforms as artificial reef materials.
But there are, as with any program, a series of pros and cons associated with reefing offshore oil and gas platform. And now we'll take a quick look at some of those negative impacts. So one of the first negative areas that we see is the fact that a rigs to reefs program is not a one-size-fits-all program. For example, what works in the Gulf of Mexico won't necessarily work in Africa, off of Thailand, or in Malaysia. And we see a great example of that with what's going on in California. What's working in the Gulf of Mexico isn't working in California. We also want to think about the spread of invasive species. We know that offshore oil and gas platforms can function as stepping stones, enabling invasive species like Tabastria or orange cup coral to hop from platform to platform and spread across our oceans. But it's important to note that platforms haven't been found to be spreading these species at a greater rate than those found on natural reefs. We also need to think about greenwashing. At what point does it become simply ocean dumping and oil companies trying to get out of having to clean up their assets? It's difficult for an oil company to say, let's leave our oil platforms in place because they're successful, thriving reefs, because from their beach share, most people think of offshore oil and gas spills or toxins in our oceans. It's difficult to imagine that there is a thriving reef ecosystem found living below the surface. And finally, we need to think about other ocean users. These platforms can be as tall as the Empire State Building. When you reef them onto their side, they can obstruct other ocean users like fishermen who may need to access those areas for things like trawling. Now, trawling is like taking a bulldozer the size of a football field and dragging it along the ocean bottom. It's very, very destructive, but it's an important source of income for a lot of countries worldwide, and placing an oil platform on the sea floor is going to obstruct those activities.
Now we'll take a look at some of the potential positive impacts. Of course, there are the ecological benefits and the potential for these structures to provide important habitat, especially as we continue to degrade our nearshore resources. What we're finding is that many fish are moving offshore and making their permanent home on these structures. By repurposing the platforms as reefs, we also see an opportunity to reduce pollution. Removing these structures would require heavy lift vessels and barges. And unfortunately, in California, we don't have the infrastructure on shore to properly dispose of and recycle this material. So it would be placed on the back of a barge and most likely sent across the Pacific to Southeast Asia to be broken down in a shipyard. Once those barges go outside of our state waters, which is 3 nautical miles, they shift from diesel to bunker fuel. And bunker fuel makes diesel look like champagne. It has a significant carbon footprint associated with it. So if we can find ways to reuse the structures and reuse that material locally, that would have an opportunity to really reduce pollution. Lastly, but definitely not least, are the financial benefits. As I mentioned, reefing a structure has significant cost savings. And those costs are not just borne by, or those savings are not just borne by the oil companies. They have to share them with the state. In the Gulf of Mexico, several of those states have received large endowment funds that support Department of Fish and Wildlife and locally state-run initiatives. And in California, there's potential to bring in approximately $800 million to the state.
So we can also look to an example currently happening in California's waters with platform holly. Platform holly is the first platform in California to come up for decommissioning in over 30 years. It's a relatively small platform right off the coast of Santa Barbara, and the oil company Venego filed for bankruptcy, meaning that the platform then fell to be the responsibility of the state to remove. Well, they've already started the well abandonment process, which means sealing and capping the wells so that they don't release any more oil. And they've already transitioned into remote monitoring. So just basically keeping the lights on and off while they examine the best way to decommission the platform. Now, this is our first opportunity to reef a platform in California. So time will tell what will happen with this structure and whether or not we'll be able to reef other platforms in California.
Looking ahead, the next steps for platform holly involve the platform removal process and the environmental review, going through and getting public comment, determining what to do with this structure. Will it be fully removed, or will there be an option to repurpose it as a reef? Removed, reefed, recycled for industry. Currently, we are at a standstill in California, but the future of California's platforms, while it's yet to be fully decided, there remains hope to reuse them as reefs. This is a little bit of information about our organization, Blue Latitudes Foundation. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. Emily and I are co-presidents. We're marine scientists. We met at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and our mission is to elevate the traditional concept of ocean stewardship by uniting government, industry, and the community to work together. We've dove on oil platforms around the world, including that ecotourism resort I shared with you in Malaysia, spent countless hours underwater, and I really enjoyed studying and looking to conserve these unique ecosystems found on these oil platforms.
But we would love to hear from you. You can reach out to us on social media, on Instagram and on Facebook. You can connect with us on our website. We would love to connect with you and answer any questions you might have for us.
Ah, super, super cool. What an innovative idea. Like something that I truly would never have thought of had it not been presented in the broadcast we've had with you on in the past. And it's so neat to finally get to host and see it all laid out. What a special show. Geez. Professional detachment out the window. Amber, if you want to come out of screen share so you can see us again, have a bit of a conversation, we're going to dive in with Q&A. We already have a bunch of questions, and for our YouTube audience, please do keep sharing them. We'd love to hear from you there. One of our questions at the end, you talked about countless dives. Do you have a number of dives that you've been on? Can you tell us a little bit about scuba diving for our audience that might not have ever had the chance to go beneath the waves?
Oh gosh, well over 500 dives probably, and counting. Going underwater, it's like nothing you've ever experienced before. I highly encourage you to do it. It's like anything. When you see what goes on below the surface, you have a lot more respect and understanding and a lot less fear about what might be below the surface. You know, what you see from their beach chair might just look like a blue ocean surface. You don't know that under the water, there can be thriving reef metropolises filled with fish, invertebrates, corals. It's a beautiful underwater world. Can also be a very peaceful experience to just be focusing on your breath, breathing in, breathing out. And you'll find that fish, just like people, have their own personalities and like to engage with you as a scuba diver on so many levels.
Yeah. Amber, anything to add? Pretty great message.
Yeah, I mean, I just echo it. I would just echo.
We can go back and forth with the questions. It's always kind of tricky in two-person things, but I love that you focused on the breathing in that as well. It's something that just does not get talked about by a lot of scuba divers, but it's really, really cool to gain that as a skill. And I want to stress for our audience, I know in our first program in this series, we talked about scuba diving, and at 10 years old, you can start on the path to being a diver like Amber and Emily. So like, even if you live in Iowa or Saskatchewan and you're not near an ocean or even any lakes, there are quarries, there are pools. It's like magic to be able to breathe underwater, and it opens up such a huge percentage of the world to you. So great first question. All right, second one coming in. You highlighted a few international places. Are there places where you as an organization, as Blue Latitudes, are going to do lots of extra stuff? Are there countries that are particularly amenable to this idea that are sort of coming online for you, so to speak?
Yes, absolutely. So there are countries all over the world that are investigating this opportunity of reefing. This past year, we were working down in Peru, where they have offshore oil and gas platforms, but they don't have any legislative pathways in place, and they don't really know how it's done in the rest of the world. So we came and really talked to them about how programs have been successful, the pros, the cons, the pitfalls, things to really look out for. We're also working in Africa. We've worked in several countries off of West Africa, understanding how their platforms function as reef environments. And again, working with the local stakeholders, because in Africa, fishing and the fisheries are such a critical part to their livelihood. So it's not just about repurposing this as a reef and benefiting the fish or the marine life, but you have to think about the people that connect with that environment. And so it's been important for us to make those engagements, and we've really enjoyed doing that in Africa.
Super, super cool. All right, Emily, we'll field this one with you. So you talked a lot about repurposing these rigs and sort of after they're decommissioned. Could an active rig be a place where you have all this wildlife? Could you sort of plant coral or plant ecosystems on something that's actively in use, or does the actual use of it prevent that in some way that we're not sharing?
That's the beauty of these oil platforms. We don't have to do anything. The second that they're placed into the water column, they start to attract marine life and eventually produce marine life. So when we talk about reefing, we're not actually creating new artificial reefs. We're talking about preserving the reefs that are already growing on these offshore oil and gas platforms.
Excellent. I'm so glad we got that question, and thank you for that, guys. All right, Miss Howell's class, our Castlebrook Secondary School, they want to know a little bit more about the ecological benefits of rig reefs. There we go. Hard to say. Amber, I know you shared a little bit in the presentation, but do go on.
Yes, so the ecological benefits of these structures are very important, and they've been studied regionally. So not just looking at, not a platform in California is different than a platform in Peru, and each structure can offer a different type of habitat. But the most important thing is to understand that these structures are artificial reefs, and an artificial reef mimics the natural surrounding environment. So what you see on that oil platform is going to be mimicking what's in the surrounding waters. That could be anything from corals to fish species to even some pelagics, like we've seen sharks, turtles, and things like that around these structures.
Very, very cool. Again, we got a chance to see some really special imagery of this, but if you go to Blue Latitudes online, you go to their website, this might cover up a bit of your face. There we go. There's so much more to discover. It's a really, really spectacular work that you two are up to. So very neat question, guys. All right. Walnut Grove Public School, Ms. Russell's class wants to know, how do oil companies get the oil out from the ocean floor? And so if you're decommissioning a rig, how do you stop it from continuing to flow out? Could you explain a little bit about the mechanics of that, Emily?
Sure. So with every oil and gas platform, they'll have multiple wells scattered throughout the ocean. And I actually didn't know this when I first got into this field. I always thought you'd have an oil platform and it went straight down into the well right below it. But you can have miles and miles of wells that are scattered all throughout the seafloor. And then there are pipelines that are connected to that. So they'll be constantly, functions almost like a pressure, like suction. It starts to pull the oil up and bring it back to that central oil platform. So when we reef a platform, what we're talking about is sealing and capping all of those wells in the same way that they would do it if they were going to totally remove it, so that there's never going to be a threat of an oil spill. And if there is an oil spill, the oil company will always be on the hook for cleaning up that spill, regardless of if it's reefed or totally decommissioned and removed. So when an oil platform is reefed or decommissioned, all those wells are going to be sealed and capped. They call it pigging the wells. They'll clean everything out, and then they put a sort of cement cap over the structure itself. Obviously, that's very simplifying it, but essentially you get the idea. They seal and cap the wells.
Yeah.
Platform stays in place.
It's a bit of a unusual example in that this is not how most rigs end up ending their lives, but Deepwater Horizon is something that certainly a lot of adults, your teachers will know about as an example, where you simply plug the top. But it's a really fascinating process. And again, just to see the visualization of how many of these things are in the oceans around the world is really fantastic, and sort of underscores the potential for good in the years to come. All right, easy one for you. And I know you highlighted this at the end. How old is your company for one of our classes? Or organization?
Yes. Yeah. So we started Blue Latitudes right after graduate school. Emily and I graduated from Scripps Institution of Oceanography in 2014. And in 2015, we started our consulting company, Blue Latitudes LLC. We work as environmental consultants with offshore oil and gas companies and governments, supporting them and looking at their platforms on a case-by-case basis to determine if they would be good candidates to be reefed. To do this, we use ROVs, remotely operated vehicles, to do environmental surveys. We use eDNA, telemetry, acoustics to understand how these structures are functioning and if they are functioning as reefs. Then in 2018, we formed Blue Latitudes Foundation, which is a separate organization, and it's our nonprofit arm. So through the Blue Latitudes Foundation, we focus on education and outreach. It allows us to come and speak things like this. And we focus on that unique area where there are opportunities for ocean conservation at the intersection of industry and the environment.
Super, super cool. And by the way, for our students that might not know, the Scripps Institute is like the creme de la creme of great ocean stuff in the world. So if you get the chance to go there, if you're really keen to be someone like Amber or Emily, it's the place to be for co-research. I've had the privilege of going myself. Super, super cool spot. So this actually speaks to your educational journey more broadly. We have a question about if someone wants to be you and they're in grade 4 or grade 8, what should they start doing now to help make that happen? Emily.
Well, it's a great question. I mean, I really do believe that really anybody can be a scientist. So being a scientist means you're asking questions and you're trying to be curious and explore the world. If you want to get into the ocean sciences, not everybody needs to be a diver to be an ocean scientist. We went to school with many people that are very famous oceanographers that never actually went under the water themselves. But I think, really starting to gain an interest and get exposed to different avenues for science, whether that be volunteering at an aquarium, going down to do local beach cleanups, getting involved at local schools and universities that do oceanographic work. There's so many tools that are out there that can help us study the oceans. The key question becomes, which of those tools are you most interested in, and how do you want to learn how to use them?
Very, very nice answer. And I want to stress too, you highlighted a few of the cool things that you've gotten to do in your role with, again, eDNA, telemetry. You basically listed like the creme de la creme of cool science and technology that's being used to understand the ocean. And we're going to be featuring these both throughout the Ambassadors of Conservation series, through all our ocean programs. So if you're keen to be involved in ocean stuff right now, it's like the golden age to be a student. So I hope some of you will take that chance. And if not, you can just go visit that super cool reef resort that we highlighted mid-broadcast. We've got a cool one from Ms. Russell's class. They're in Ontario. They're in Brampton, near where I grew up. They want to know if there are any oil platforms in Canada that are being turned into reefs, particularly near Ontario. So this could be the Great Lakes. This could be the oceans on our coast. Do we know anything, Amber?
I'm not aware of any oil platforms in Canada. So I don't think so. Not off the top of my head.
There you go. Well, we'll reach out to our government. We'll see. We've got a fairly new government, and we'll see if there's an option to do some cool legislation on something like that, because it's a very neat thing you guys are up to. Yes. Species, this is for both of you. Species on these reefs. You've had the chance to dive in them a lot. Is there a favorite fish, a favorite creature? I'll ask this to both of you. Anything that jumps to mind?
It's like it's such a charismatic species. I'd love to see the California Garibaldi on the platforms. They're just, big orange goldfish on the platforms. They're very gregarious, very friendly. They like to come right up to you. I'd say those are probably my favorite things to see on California's oil platforms.
Mm.
It's the trickiest one for people that are nature nerds.
Yeah, it definitely is. We have dove some platforms in the Gulf of Mexico, and I really love seeing the barracudas that school
Yes.
around there. They
Cool.
are somewhat like I'm more intimidated by them than I am by a shark.
Yep.
And they have big teeth, and they are schooling. They're very curious. They'll come up and size you up underwater. So those are really cool fish to see when you're out and diving.
Every single diver we've had on this program that has mentioned running into a barracuda says the exact same line in relation to sharks. Every diver we've ever run across is like, oh, sharks, how cool is that? So nice to see them. But a big toothy fish under the water that's actually like looking you in the eye is a little bit unnerving. I've seen them from a dock before looking down, and that was close enough, frankly.
Yeah.
So is there a favorite part of your job? It's sort of our classic question here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. We'll do this, and we're nearing the end of the broadcast. We'll probably take one more after this before we wrap up. I'll leave it to both of you again. Favorite thing you get to do?
I think my favorite thing I get to do is when we do some exploration using remotely operated vehicles or underwater robots to explore the deep ocean. A lot of times we get to see things underwater at depths that no one has ever seen before. So it's a real privilege being able to explore those areas. It's super dark, and then every once in a while you see a really weird fish come up into the camera. So I think that's probably my favorite thing that we get to do is exploring the really deep ocean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is one of my favorite things too, but I'm going to think of another favorite thing. I really love learning about new environments and kind of understanding how these structures play a role in new areas like Peru or Africa. Or we just got a new project in Alaska. So what's the marine life like in Alaska? How are these platforms contributing to those ecosystems there? If they are at all, what role do they play? So really coming into new areas and asking those questions is important, and something I really love about our work.
No better message than that. Thank you, too. That was fantastic. Again, time flies when you're having fun. We are going to wrap up fairly soon. I do want to encourage all our classes, check out bluelatitudesfoundation.org, at Blue Latitudes Foundation on social media. There's so much there. If you want to check out the rest of our Ambassadors for Conservation series, it's all below. Everything goes to our YouTube channel, and both Emily and Amber are our If Then Ambassadors du jour, one of the great campaigns of all time. I really encourage you to check it out. This is our third series with them, and they've all been so special. Before we wrap up and say farewell to all our classes, is there any final message you want to leave our kids with today about the amazing work you're up to before we say goodbye?
You know what? I think the biggest takeaway from the work that we do is I really encourage everyone to look at our oceans a little bit differently, think a little bit creatively about how we manage our ocean resources. Sometimes the easiest solutions are lying right there in wait, and some objects are more than what they seem. So I always encourage students to think creatively about how we manage our ocean resources and think a little bit differently about some of the structures we have offshore.
Very cool. Amber?
Yeah, I want to empower everyone to know that they can care and protect our oceans from wherever they are. You don't have to be living by the ocean. It boils down to the decisions that you make as a consumer, thinking about the materials that you're using, whether that be bringing a reusable bag to the grocery store or opting to use a reusable water bottle versus buying plastic water bottle, and also always being conscious of recycling, reducing, reusing things. Those are decisions you can make from home that have cascading impacts and effects for our oceans and the rest of our terrestrial environments as well.
I'm really happy you mentioned all this because climate change is a big thing impacting the ocean. Overfishing is a big thing impacting the ocean. And both of those things are where people can make a real positive difference in their own lives as well. But for our students, the issue of marine plastic, which affects pretty much every ecosystem on this planet, everyone can do something really, really easily like that. And I think our students really know that. And you've sort of embodied this in a way that everyone thought our generation would do. And we did okay. But kids in classes these days, you guys know this. You have a huge understanding of it. You know what you can do to make a positive difference. And that's such a huge thing. So please pack those littlest lunches, take a reusable water bottle. Everything Amber said, it's really, really important, and can't encourage it enough. Ladies, thank you so much for joining. You're our one duo on our Ambassadors of Conservation thing. And I know that can be a bit of a crazy thing sometimes, but we really appreciate you joining us. And so on behalf of all our classes, thank you both so much and have a wonderful rest of the day. We'll see you soon. And thanks so much for joining. Bye, Amber.
Thank you.
Bye, Emily.